I'm so thankful that you are here with us today and you're going to do this panel that's very special to my heart. And let's just have a great time. Thank you, everybody.
Good afternoon, everyone. I am so happy to be here with these amazing, talented author and illustrator. It's such a privilege to meet women who are so ambitious and talented. And being a lover of books, and from a very young age, and actually growing up and being in a space in my life where I could meet people who actually wrote books. And now that I'm reading to my toddlers is just very, very, very special to me. So welcome, welcome, welcome. This afternoon, for our Ink and Inspiration Children's Literature Deep Dive. We feature today our acclaimed authors, Ms. Vashti Harrison and Brianna J. McDaniel. Our engaging session will explore the art and impact of children's literature, delving into the creative process behind crafting the amazing stories that resonate with our young readers. Ms. Harrison is known for her vibrant illustration and empowering biographies, and Ms. McDaniel celebrated for her works focusing on diversity and identity. They will both share their insights on storytelling, inspiration, and the power of representation in shaping young minds, which I believe to be so very important. Our panel will offer a rich discussion for aspiring writers, educators, and book lovers alike. So please allow me to introduce Brianna McDaniel. Brianna is an emerging, Brianna is sitting to my immediate right, is an emerging creative and recovering scholar. She's published in a myriad academic journals and academic anthology, and her debut picture book, Hands Up, was published with Dial Book in 2019. Her newest book with Penguin Random House imprint Dial, Go Forth and Tell the Life of August Baker, Librarian and Master Storyteller, was published on February 6, 2024, and has received 5-star reviews. Her fifth picture book, Cute Tooth, was published in April 2024, and she also has 2 more picture books with Henry Holt Books for young readers at Macmillan. Brianna is the co-founder of Researchers Exploring Inclusive Youth Literature and completed her PhD at a university in the UK. She's looked at surveillance in representations of Black children as food. As an activist, she's engaged in thinking through access to different types of literacy for families from the global majority, and she is adamant about promoting the work and connections of children's book creators from those communities as well. Please put your hands together for Brianna J. McDaniel. Allow me to introduce the amazing Vashti Harrison. Vashti is the New York Times best-selling creator of Big, which was awarded the 2024 Caldecott Medal, a Coretta Scott King Book Award Author Honor, and a Coretta Scott King Book Award Illustrator Honor, in addition to being a National Book Award finalist. Vashti is also the #1 New York Times best-selling creator of Little Leaders, Little Dreamers, and Little Legends. She is the illustrator of Lupita Nyong'o's Soloway, for which she has received a Coretta Scott King Book Award Illustrator Honor as well. She is also the illustrator for Matthew A. Cherry's Hair Love, Andreas Beatty's I Love You Like Yellow, and Stephanie V. W. Lucianovic, Hello Star, among others. She's a 2-time recipient of the NAACP Image Award for Outstanding Literary Work for Children. Vashti lives in Brooklyn, New York, and we're so happy to have her today. Thank you, ladies. It's such an honor to be in your presence. And to kick things off, we're going to have Miss Brianna do a reading from her book, Impossible Moon.
Thank you so much. So we're very excited to be here. And I can read from Impossible Moon, but I first wanted to read about inspiration for that space, which I think is very appropriate. So I write a lot about grief, which may seem weird because I write books for children, and it's like, where do they do that? And the reality is that there's a lot of emotions in books for children that we specifically write towards, and we write to those kids and their experiences. And before I wrote Impossible Moon, or I finished Impossible Moon, I was working on my PhD at a university in the UK. I came to the University of Cambridge, and that was an experience that will never be repeated. And so when I was thinking about grieving and I was in that space, I started to think about how I can imagine grief and healing for Black girls. So this is what I wrote. Growing up, I was gloriously girl, which I think for me was just about celebration and believing girl women were everything. Every house in my family was filled with women and girls, half-dressed, undressed, dressed to the nines, barefoot, high-heeled, unashamed, and bright. I wasn't punished for torn tights or dirty dresses, just for running around the house when there was a cake in the oven. If you are in a space, you know, make a cake fall. Then I was chased out of girlhood. I feel like I was rushed out by poverty and demands for my blossoming body because I started working hard at 15 and was dodging sexual advances almost 4 years before that. I always felt more Hottentot than Harriet. I am Hottentot, Sarah, Sula, Shug. I grieve my girlhood. I don't think there's a day that goes by where I'm not bowled over by overwhelming grief that one by one plucks at the strands of my sanity, and it is so scary sometimes, this grief. Mainly, it is scary because of the internal tug of war that in my headspace claims there is freedom in a death you can control and create for yourself. Another begs for you to explore the opportunities for liberation in a plane that's here in this mortal life. Most folks know that I'm a crybaby. I cry joyous, sad, angry, frustrated, delighted, sympathetic, wild tears whenever I feel the need to, and I was very rarely ever held back from that experience. So, as I talked to my therapist in Cambridge, I realized I wasn't imagining grief for myself. So I stopped and I angered to explore, and this is what I returned with. If I could gather up every Black girl under the moon, I would open my arms to carry their cares, giving them space to pick through the jumbled web life hands us. I imagine our celestial selves making space for each other and offering murmurs of comfort. Our storms are shared and protected by the constellations that have always seen and known our unique struggles. In our ascended sisterhood, we'll tell each other, it wasn't just a house, it was your memories and your community that tree tore through when it fell. Yes, you've made more friends, but she was your friend. And since you're both still alive, it's hard to understand why you don't talk anymore. It makes sense that you didn't know what to say to her mother because you get to grow old and her daughter doesn't. These jobs weren't built to support your joy. With these thoughts, I begin to imagine grief and healing for Black girls. Thank you.
Wow. Wow, that's just amazing. You know, you gave me goosebumps while you were reading that because I can relate to it so much. Growing up, when I was younger, I despised the color of my skin, and it's not until I grew up and I realized that it's the melanin is just magical. But that is so beautiful. Thank you, Brianna. Thank you. I just want to ask you, as an author, what excites you most about writing for young readers, and what unique opportunities do you see in children's literature for exploring big ideas in simple and impactful ways?
I think the most exciting thing is to create with kids. I don't think that my stories have a ton of meaning, or they have meaning to me, but without kids, there's something that's left behind with books for children. So when I think about the readers, I think there's more care and intention there than a lot of people would assume. I was just actually talking about Impossible Moon with some kids in Oakland, California, and I was talking about why I wrote the story and talking about my grandmother, who was a character in the book. And, you know, in the book, the very beginning, the grandmother is sick, and so my grandmother was sick. And there was a young man, his name was Francis. And Francis said, I have 2 questions. And I said, okay, yeah, give it to me. And he said, my first question is, where can I buy this book? And I was like, okay, 11-year-old king. If you're gonna be out here buying books, you can go to Target, you can go to an independent bookstore, you can go to Barnes and Noble. He said, okay. And then his next question, it struck me. He said, and is your grandmother okay? And so, I guess I'll tell you my answer. First of all, I looked to the teacher and I was like, help me. And she was like, it's like, okay. I said, well, you know, I think my grandmother is okay, but she's not with us anymore. She did pass away. And he said, I'm very, very sorry. And I think that was one of the most authentic admissions that I had gotten about my grandmother ever, to be honest. He bowed his head and he just nodded, and he really, you know, and so I kind of could think to myself, I wonder what he has experienced in his life at 11 that has it so that he can convey this type of authenticity to me, a 35-year-old who is still actively grieving her grandmother. But I think really at the heart of it too was that there was complexity in our experiences and our connection together that I try to reach toward when I write. And that is exciting because kids have layers, even if we don't always tap into or acknowledge in our rush to our adult things, those layers in them.
That's absolutely true. I can remember when I lost my dad, and I did not know how to tell my boys that they lost their grandpa. So having this narrative for children at such a young age to walk them through grief is just absolutely amazing. Yeah. And Vashti, we're finally getting to you. Your Little Leader series has become very iconic for celebrating the lives of trailblazing women and figures of color. What is your process for selecting which individuals to feature, and how do you balance storytelling with historical accuracy in a way that captivates the children?
Thank you for that question. For Little Leaders was the first book I wrote. That was the book that turned me into an author. I didn't think that I would be a person who wrote books. I certainly didn't think I would be writing nonfiction, and definitely not history. I was not a kid who thought that she liked history. I could memorize the material and I could pass the test, but I wasn't kind of drawn to history. But I came up with this idea during Black History Month almost 8 years ago. It was right after the inauguration of our former and soon-to-be president, and I felt like I want to approach Black History Month different this year. I want to draw a woman from history every day. I want to celebrate these. What better to combat all of this darkness and sadness that we feel around us than beautiful Black women. So I wanted to just draw a beautiful Black woman every day for the month of Black History Month, and write a short bio and maybe celebrate a little bit of the long neglected stories. That was what Carter G. Woodson founded Negro History Week on, the idea of celebrating the stories that have been long neglected throughout history. And so I started posting these little bios, these little illustrations, and people were hungry for it. People were asking for it. I mean, I think many people felt the same way I did, sort of, at a loss for how to express their grief. So why not funnel that through celebrating other people? And I had the opportunity to turn that into a book, and I was terrified. I didn't think that I could write a book, but I thought to myself, okay, well, if this is going to be a book for children, then I want to be able to showcase many different fields of study, because there's a question that kids get asked on nearly every day of their lives from nearly every single adult they meet. And it's not a question I enjoyed when I was a kid, but what do you want to be when you grow up is kind of a big question. And I don't want to force kids to have to choose too early or even, decide too soon. But I want to kind of empower them with all of the different opportunities that exist out there. So of the 40 women that are in the book, I try to, show that Black history isn't just activism. Black history isn't just athletes. It's artists and engineers and pilots and dancers, and we can be all of these things. Additionally, I thought, what if this is a kid's first introduction to Black history? Then that means I need to include some of the big names. I don't need to include every big name, because they will encounter the Rosa Parkses and the Harriet Tubmans at school, but I needed to kind of balance a little bit of the big names with the sort of hidden figures. But more than anything, I approached it because I'm an artist and I wanted to create a book that felt inviting and exciting and pretty. And so I wanted the colors to be bright. I wanted any kid to be able to flip to any single page and say, that one looks like me, or that one could be me, and not feel like, oh, well, this one's ugly, or I don't like the clothes that she's wearing, or something like that. I wanted everything to be exciting because that's what pulled me in. And then writing the bios, I only have about 200 words to tell a person's entire life, which is kind of a very small amount of time. But I try to start with the person's childhood, at least something, an entry point for a young reader to say, well, when Mae Jemison was young, she liked science and dance. And that's every time you meet a kid. One day they want to be an astronaut, the next day they want to be a dancer, the next day they want to be, a computer scientist. So start with their childhood, talk about their legacy, talk about their story, and then end with their legacy, really. So it keeps it short and exciting so that there's space for them to want to learn more afterwards.
That is so important. Representation, I've always spoke about representation is so important. And when I went through your book, I was like, dang, this is the book I needed when I was little. Like, I really loved it. And I love that with the illustration, you could actually feel the impact of it. It's very emotional to connect the words with the pictures. So great job. Kudos to you for that. You've worked across multiple genres, from biography to fiction. What challenges or freedoms do you find when switching between these forms, and how does it influence your creative approach to children's literature?
I think every book I illustrate, I approach it a little bit differently. Usually I'm trying to find the aspect of the story that would be the most exciting for the young Vashti, the kid that maybe just wanted to look at the pictures and then read the words later. And so sometimes that is in the nonfiction, or, I illustrated a book called Hello Star that's like, it's very science driven, but it is a book about empathy. So I wanted the colors to feel kind of soft, almost like a bedtime story, even though we're talking about stars and supernovas, and there's a glossary at the end of that book. But so I'm thinking about how to balance, how can I make the illustrations marry these words, but create something that isn't just it's not a one-to-one, ratio. I'm trying to create I'm trying to, you know how in storytelling we talk about gap closing? If I give you A and C, you can probably figure out B. I want to be able to leave space for the kid to kind of put something in there so that they can interpret it, but I'm also interested in being able to provide, another aspect that, will create a tone, a tone for reading the book and interpreting the book however they want. Does that make sense?
Yes, you put so much thought and energy behind it, so kudos to you for that and producing something that, will tremendously impact our future generation. Thank you. Brianna, how do you see the role of children's literature evolving in today's social and cultural climate? And what responsibilities do you believe authors have in shaping the narratives that influence young readers?
So when I was in the UK, when I lived in the UK, Researchers Exploring Inclusive Youth Literature was a network that I created that then became a conference, that then became multiple series, that then had conferences in places in the global south, and was just doing a lot of work. And the point of that book was what I call the idea of Ratatouille, or the Ratatouille idea. Anybody, have you seen Ratatouille? Okay, so there's the part where the chef is like, anyone can cook. I believe anybody can be a researcher, and it's not dictated by you being, having gotten your PhD from some fancy university. That also includes children. And so when I think about children's literature specifically as a field, because children's literature is, I almost said unfortunately, I don't want to say unfortunately, children's literature just is my life. I review picture books or books for children, I write books for children, and I study children's literature globally. And I know that's not what my mom dreamed about when she had thoughts for my future, but it's pretty cool. And in that space, though, I get to participate and connect with kids in different spaces. At schools, yes, but at daycare centers, at recreation spaces, anywhere where people want us to come in and have conversations, I will go. And in that space where they have the opportunity to build their own ideas and dreams, I'm there as a facilitator to encourage them. That's what these books are doing. And also, since we're talking about grief, the book is not a sad book. Please go and buy it. It has other things in there, not just grief. But if kids want to reach into ideas around grief, my encouragement is that they could do that as researchers who also write for themselves. So it's putting kids in a space where they are encouraged and they are elevated, and they get a platform to talk about art and to talk about craft and to talk about who they are through children's literature. So yes, I think, I'm glad we still have jobs. That's good. But I think about those folks that are coming up after us, the folks who are reading our books and who've never seen themselves in these stories. My niece was telling me about seeing herself in Vashti's story, Big. And my other niece, I wrote about her in my book, Hands Up, in the back of my book. And so she actually got sent home from school the other week. And I went to go and see her, and I said, you have legacy that you're a part of. I said, people know who you are. People ask me about you. I just want you to know that you're not an anonymous person. I think we can go through life and maybe nobody will ever know our name, but her name is forever in print in that book. And so I just wanted her to understand that beyond herself and the environment that she is in, which is the environment that I grew up in, there's story to her. And it's for her to build and to write and to create her story in other spaces. Children's literature uses images and prose and poems and lots of different things. But it's not just for children, or it is for children of all ages. and said.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. Because when I'm reading bedtime stories for my 2-year-old, I'm more excited about a story than he is. And I'm like, come here, look at this. Look, you see the boy, you see the. So I'm more excited to get into these stories. And I like what you said, that it's not only books for them to read and to, see a representation of themselves, but for them to create a space for themselves, for them to create their own art. And I love that they can get into research. They can say, I'm not too little to do research. And they can write. And I love that. I love that you do that for them. So thank you so much. In your book, Hands Up, you take a phrase with historical and social weight and reframe it in a positive light. What inspired you to tell that particular story, and how did you balance a serious undertone with a joyful, uplifting message?
I believe that there is joy in that book, definitely. I definitely think that there's joy in that book. I think, though, it's mostly should be attributed to the illustration. And that's why I think picture books are so special. Is that me? No. Oh, because I had an alarm on, so I'm not talking too long and I can hear it buzz. Joy. Thank you. Neurodivergence, y'all. Yep, so joy, but I think, and that's why I think it's really important to think about what that marriage that Vashti was talking about is, how incredible and important that is, and it's in a picture book. And actually, there's this fantastic scholar, Diane Johnson, who talks about how images speak. And that's why picture books are important, not just for kids who can read the words, but for the folks who can read the images. Have you ever sat down with a child who is reading a book and they can't actually read the words? And so they're like, the little girl walks into the door, page turn.
Yeah.
She sees the dog. She goes, oh my gosh,
Yes.
a dog.
Yes.
Page turn. And I'm doing that.
Yes.
This is not just an example. That is my niece reading books about Bluey. And so, anyway, I don't want to go too far off the tangent. The book is joyful, I think, in large part because of the images. But the first edit of that book was not a happy story. It had a reflection on Hands Up, where one child, a family was crowded around a television, and the child goes, why did they shoot him, Dad? His hands were up. And my editor was like, no? And I was like, no? And she was like, and they actually kind of stripped the book from a lot of the different things that I had to in it, so that it just became a reflection on all of the times in life that we do put our hands up, and that's a slice of life book. It's just looking at slices of life. But I needed a way, specifically for my kids like Taylor, to feel included in the conversation that was happening in 2014 when I first wrote that book. They were seeing some of the same images that we were seeing, and yet we were talking literally over their heads, like they couldn't hear or like they couldn't, interact with what was happening. So I needed to tap into that part of our community. And so that's why I wrote that book, to do that.
Yeah, isn't that just amazing? I mean, we have people who are looking out for our little ones and allowing them to be heard, and I think that's so important. And speaking of images and amazing images we have in this book, we have our wonderful illustrator, and she will be doing a live drawing for us.
Okay. Do you want me to hold this for you?
I feel like everyone can hear me, right? For this, okay. I can do everything one-handed. I'm really good at multitasking. So I want to give you a little background on my book, Big. This is my first piece of fiction. And it is a book about many things. I'll just begin. So this is how it begins. Once there was a girl with a big laugh and a big heart and very big dreams. She learned her ABCs and 1, 2, 3s. She always said please and thank you, and even put away all her toys. At dinner, she ate all her food. What a big girl you are, the adults would say. And it was good. She grew and learned and laughed and dreamed and grew and grew and grew. And it was good. Until it wasn't. So I'm going to stop there. Because there aren't very many words in this book. It is about how we use the word big with children, how it can change from a word of affirmation to something negative, particularly in girls' lives, particularly in Black girls' lives. So I'm going to skip to the very end and read the author's note. In childhood, big is good, big is impressive, aspirational. But somewhere along the way, the world begins to tell us something different, that big is bad, that being big is undesirable. I was never a dancer, like the girl in the book, but I did get stuck in a swing when I was younger, which is the inciting incident of this book. Some of the older kids and I were playing on the baby swings, and I couldn't get out. I was the only one to get into trouble. My size indicated to adults that I was big enough to know better, even though I was still just a kid. I learned that day that my body did not fit. It did not belong. And adults no longer saw me as a little girl who could make innocent mistakes. While my experience was far less overt than the one in this book, the thoughts and words at work are the same. A child sits in the crosshairs of adultification bias and anti-fat bias. She is subjected to judgments and prejudices that are harmful and have lasting effects. Still, she finds enough self-love to return the words that were unkind and unhelpful. I hope she will stand as a guide to all who need to see her journey, especially those of us who are Black girls in big bodies. I remember thinking I could never wear the color pink, that it was too bright a color and it might make me stand out. From an early age, I developed insecurities that told me that it was safer to shrink into the background and try not to call attention to myself. I chose the color palette for this book to reject that old thinking. In color psychology, pink is associated with gentle love, tenderness, and nurturing. Pink flowers symbolize innocence, joy, playfulness, and happiness. And these are all things this girl deserves. Her body is not a problem that needs fixing, and neither did mine that day on the playground. What needs fixing are the implicit biases we all hold. I wish I could give the girl a hug, the part of her that is me and the part of her that might be you, and tell her that she is deserving of all the care and joy in the world, no matter what. So that's,
Wow.
There's a surprise in the book, so I'll let you guys read that for yourselves. But yeah, I'm just thinking a little bit about, we were talking about types of books, and Bree has many different books, some very fun ones and some very tender ones. And we talk a lot about, I was talking to my agent recently about, I wish I had some fun books. I'm scared my books are too sad for the kids. And she said, no, your books are lap books. They're the books that people kind of get in close and read quietly with the people they care about the most. And that's kind of, that is honestly my dream. I want to be able to make books that ask people to pay attention, ask readers to give this girl the care and attention that she deserves. So at a certain point, the words fall away, and I just ask you to look at her and feel what she is feeling. And I think, again, I also didn't want to write a sad book, but I did want to show readers, anyone who might be experiencing things that this character is going through, how she deals with some things that are difficult. And I think that can be it is one of the magical powers of children's books. Often books aren't there to show us how bad the world is. They're there to arm us with the tools for how to deal with a world that will be bad. So that's what I was thinking about when I was working on this book. So I'm happy to give you a short drawing demonstration. So I want to give you guys, this is what I teach in my school visits. Whenever I want to make something that feels kind of complicated or complex, I like to break it down into simple shapes, shapes we all know how to draw and use. That's not my favorite pencil. Sketching. Okay. So anytime I meet someone new and I tell them I'm an illustrator, the first thing that they say to me is, I can't draw. All I can draw is a stick figure. But what they don't know, honestly, if someone, I'm going to make y'all start giving me $1 every time I hear that. But what they don't know is that a stick figure is a very powerful tool in posing and crafting an image. So I want my character to be in this sort of ballet pose with her arms out and her leg out. So that's the same character with the same pieces, and all I've done is just move them a little bit. And so now this one has a little bit more action. There's something happening. So I'm going to recreate that pose with my building blocks, my circle, my square, and my triangle. So it's best that nothing is perfect. I'm going to use a bunch of lines to kind of get the general shape that I want. So we've got a squished down circle. I'm going to use a square to be my torso and some triangles to be my arms and legs. Okay. So that was pretty quick. Is it starting to look like a person yet? So I know you can all do that, right? Those are just simple shapes. I'm just going to resize this so everything will fit. So now this is my roadmap for finishing the drawing. I know that her feet are going to go about here and here. Her hands are going to go here and here. And this is where her face goes. So as I sketch this in, I'll give you another trick. So I'm going to imagine that on my face is an imaginary vertical line going down the center and an imaginary horizontal line going across where the eyes will be. So imagine the eyes sit on this line, and I know that the nose goes in the center, the mouth goes underneath that, and we've got eyebrows, right? So I want my character to be facing this way. I'm going to imagine that this is a sphere and move my imaginary horizontal and vertical line. So now this one looks like it's looking this way, and this one looks like it's looking this way. This is a tool I can use to move her face around in dimension. So it's not just a circle anymore. Now it is a sphere. So this is everything I need to finish my sketch. So I'm just going to make this a little bit lighter, and I'm going to go over top of it with my darker line. So while I do this, you guys can just let me keep talking. I can draw and talk at the same time, or you guys can talk about other things. You can ask more questions, because it's a little easier if I put both hands on the iPad.
Okay. So can I just say, first of all, Vashti asked me earlier what I thought about something that she had designed. And I was like, I think you're asking the wrong person because I'm such a big fan. I'm just going to be like, yep, to everything. And I was watching her earlier doing some sketching. And I was like, wow, that sketch looks really familiar. And then I looked over, and there was this beautiful little girl, and she had this really intricate, gorgeous hairstyle, and I noticed it when she came in because I already told you all my age, but I really used to love this movie called Xenon Girl from the 21st Century. Yeah, it was back in the day with Disney, and it kind of reminded me of that. And I looked over, and then I looked down at Vashti, and I looked over, and I looked at Vashti, and I was like, how did you do that so fast? It was so quick. And I can appreciate that this is breaking down the elements and the basics of how to get to here. I still cannot do that. I can't do that. So I think it's just a gift. And I looked over at Sophia and I was like, because this is so great. And
all I ask is that after I do this, And I tell kids that you can do it too. You, as the adult, don't say, well, but I can't do it. Because every single time a teacher will kind of undercut everything I've just said, which is we can all learn how to do this. It's just practice. And I want to empower kids. But a lot of adults are kind of scared of drawing. Drawing is hard, I will promise you. It's not easy. Sometimes it's imperfect and you think you know how to draw something and then suddenly it's just gone entirely. But I want kids to know that it is possible to learn how to do this, to be able to express yourself through images, and adults will be the first ones to kind of mess everything up by saying, well, I can't do it.
Which is what I just did. But also, that is the ratatouille theory. I just want to bring it back to, yes, anyone can draw. See, it works for so many different things. But what I always get asked is, so do you also draw? And with my words, yes, but with my literal hands, no. So it's really cool in this world where I get to create some words that there are talented folks like Vashti who can build out worlds with their images alongside those words, which is more magic of children's literature.
Yeah, this is so great. I just really wish that we had some little ones in the audience to be inspired today. While Vashti is doing her drawing, which is just so amazing, I can't keep my eyes off the screen. And do we have any questions? Yeah. Go ahead, Mr. Alexander. Okay.
Well, what is really funny is that me and Vashti set like a chair behind you earlier this morning and came up with some ideas for some books that we could do together, like books plural, which for me blew my mind because I don't, we don't get to work together. Yeah. So when I write the text for the book, most of the time it just goes to the illustrator and it's their interpretation of the story. And so sometimes, especially in this industry, we might be gifted the opportunity to like be really, really intentional, but we have designers and editors and all sorts of folks behind us. My book, Cute Toot, which is, it's about two sisters who have a farting contest. Like, you can look it up, it's there. But I asked my editor, like, can I request something about the art? And she was like, because you want to leave space for the illustrator to do their interpretation. I said, but the thing is, I just don't have any dark-skinned girls in any of the books that I've written so far. And I'm wondering if that's something that we could ask, because my niece Alicia has dark skin. And when I try to affirm her phenotypics, I can say we have the same lips, and I can say we have the same eyes. And she will say, but your skin is lighter than mine. And in the South, we call them red bones. Light-skinned people are red bones. And so it is like it's a process of kind of going in and out of these conversations with kids, and even in the space where we can act as creators, having to negotiate how far we can go or come back with these images. So sometimes it does feel like I can wake up with a story on my mind and on my heart and on my spirit, and then I can write, but then I still have to wrestle with what will my editor, designer, whoever say if I am very intentional about, for example, this Black girl talking to constellations that are Black in the book, but if you go to a planetarium, they're not Black. Yeah.
So, and this brings me to the second question I have in this answer.
Okay.
But what can we do as consumers, right, to support the work of creatives like yourself? Because when you talk about the original intention behind Hands Up, I get that it may be a difficult topic, but it's a relevant topic, and in the wake of what has happened this week, I think it's even more relevant. And there's no age too young to be prepared to deal with violence, because it can happen at any age. So it's not sensible to say you're not going to teach them how to deal with it, because it can happen to them. So what do we do as consumers to support you guys in being able to put the stories out there as intended, and not as the capitalist Eurocentric machine is comfortable?
You can write about it.
Yeah.
You know, use blog spaces, use Bookstagram spaces, use review spaces to tap into it. I really am not joking. I really think that everybody is and should be a researcher. It does not matter where you are, where you sit. Research is, and this is something that David talked about last night, where he talked about accessing public information and the public academy for all of us. So you write about it. Start a column, start a review space, start a book club where you're bringing authors in to have these conversations. That actually makes a big deal to our